Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. There's a lot of progression in the industry of workplace violence prevention and intervention. So in this video, we want to talk a little bit about what is that progression, primarily as it relates to legislative issues. There's been some states that have passed laws. There's states that are considering laws, but largely across the US, there's a lot of progression at a governmental level that is requiring organizations to have to look at this issue a little bit different. So we want to dive in. We want to talk about how this might impact you as an organization and give you some tips on how you can start dealing with it in your workplace. Progression across the United States. Lots of new laws published. One even got vetoed in Virginia a while back. But what are y'all's thoughts? What are y'all seeing? What are clients saying? What kind of things can we share for people to help get ahead of these issues?
Yeah, this is a topic that is kind of uneasy in this space, right? People are like, if I have, my organization is spread out across 15 different states, how the heck do I build one comprehensive program? And honestly, it's not as hard as you would think. You go to the strictest standard, the ANSI standard, ASIS standard, it covers most everything. Mm-hmm. If you couple that with the California Senate Bill 553, which hopefully soon Cal OSHA will come out with their instruction on that. If you couple both of those together, you are almost always hitting every objective and then some. So the goal is kind of to create that one enterprise-wide program, so you're not kind of siloing off, all of your different branches and all your different states, but then you have the new retail law that came out in New York. So if you're a retail space, that now complicates things. Honestly,
give everybody a little feel of what's in that law.
The retail law. So you're assuming I did my research before this episode. If you have a certain number of employees, it's over a couple hundred. I want to say it's 500. I'm not exactly sure the exact number. You have to have panic buttons in some of these stores. You have to address some of these topics within the training. You have to have a way to kind of lock down the store, all kinds of different topics here. So
policy.
Most things can be addressed through training, and that's how we normally will address them. Most things are already addressed in our training. I'll tell you that. And so it's kind of easy to get ahead of. It's also easier because it's very rare that somebody has that many employees in one retail space. So panic buttons, and you have a couple years until that has to be implemented. So you have time. They're giving you time to do all that. But yeah, so it's mainly addressing those specific hazards in your training program. And so there's a couple different ways you can do that. E-learning, it's a little bit more complicated, but if you supplement that e-learning with a lunch and learn and kind of talk through, what are some of the hazards in this workplace, same with the California law as well. Yeah. It's a great way to kind of get ahead of that and have one of your managers or leaders kind of lead that effort.
That's one of the biggest changes I think companies are really wrestling with, is localizing this program. Because it's fairly simple to create an enterprise-wide, like here's the general risk factors, here's the things that apply to everybody. But the legislation takes it one step further, where it's requiring those folks to tailor this into your local risks and local hazards, as the safety types would call it. That's definitely been an interesting challenge for some of the companies.
Yeah, now when it's written into policy, it's a little bit easier, because as we build out our policies, of course, we build that enterprise-wide policy. Like, for example, your active assailant protocol, we build it for the enterprise, and then we have site-level specific protocol, and that's just kept at every site that addresses those specific hazards to that site. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit easier to get ahead of, when it comes to policy considerations. A little bit more challenging when it comes to training, but there are ways to get around it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the New York specific stuff too, and I think one of the most interesting things there's the panic buttons was primarily the big thing that hasn't been implemented in any other legislation across the states up to this date. So there's definitely slightly more stringent reporting stuff, and keeping records and stuff like that. But the panic buttons was very specific to New York. So that's definitely something they're trying to implement in exactly what that looks like. Being able to keep panic buttons on everybody. It needs to be within arm's reach of everybody all the time. And they're figuring out how best to implement that. We get questions about that from clients all the time. Another thing too, we're looking state to state too, but then we have international, we have clients that have places, in Canada. Canada very specifically wants you to address bullying within the policy. So it becomes a point like, okay, do I have different policies for all my different locations? If I'm operating in these places at a high level, do I need to have one specifically for California? Do I need to have one specifically for New York if I'm in the retail business? And then what does it look like in Canada too? Obviously, it's important to know that healthcare is, an animal in itself when it comes to legislation and requirements for workplace violence prevention. And there's a lot of states out there that have that. I'm sure most people that are within that industry already know that. Texas has recently made the change where they have adjusted the verbiage of facility. So it needs to be all facilities. So you start getting retirement community facilities. Anytime the word facility very specifically is used, well, now they fall into the healthcare laws specifically to that. So the question, I guess, to you, Jake, what do you think? Should people that are operating in these areas, should they have something that's California specific and something that's specific to the rest of the U.S. and even other countries in the world?
That really becomes an organizational question in some ways, because there is more than one way you can do it. And we've even seen that with our clients, right? Where you have something that's kind of the broad brush that applies to everything, and then it kind of tailors in for some of those local area requirements, whether that's in the policy or programmatic documentation. Or you could split it up. It's a little more cumbersome, but some of those questions, that's where it's valuable to have your attorney, right? Have the attorney be part of the conversation, educate them on how you create effective violence prevention. Like, that's where the security professional comes into this. And then HR has the behavioral piece, the human piece. Well, the legal side can come in and say, okay, here's how we can address this from a defensibility standpoint. Right. And so it kind of becomes that cultural question. But how does an organization, so people are getting spooked by the laws, right? They're concerned about them. They are coming out. There's more coming out. Even the federal government is pursuing like the standard for healthcare and these sorts of things through federal OSHA. How can an organization tangibly implement this guidance? Like, what's a good benchmark they can look to? Like, what's a good guide they can look to facilitate this process and make it easy? Like, if I'm starting from square one, what's something I can look to help me build my program and kind of take some of the guesswork out of it? What would you guys say?
You look to us. You like to CPPS. I don't know.
Shameless plug there.
It is kind of, but it's true because we're the ones tracking all of this. This is our bread and butter. This is what we do. We're tracking all of this, and we understand how to build this and, industry specific and all of this. I think the challenge that we run into is our methodology when we build these policies, programs, is to keep them lean and mean, as we say. And so it's like when you have to put in all of these different, additives from like all these different states, countries, or whatever it is, it can kind of feel a little cumbersome, and that's hard to digest for your everyday employee because your policy is only as good as the usability. And so you want to create something that's usable. And so that becomes the challenge. And then also in training, you don't want to get bogged down by so much compliance that it's like I'm losing track of, the meaning behind this training or changing the behavior or whatever. So I think that's the biggest challenge. But
that's the value of demystifying compliance, right? When we're trying to do this just from a compliance perspective, we're missing the forest through the trees. Like, the ultimate objective of these laws is trying to keep people safe. So what do we look to for effective workplace violence prevention? It's the ANSI standard, right? It's like that's if you're looking, for those of you that are watching this video, if you're looking for the gold on how to build your program, it is that document by ASIS International. It continues to be the gold standard for these programs today.
The gold standard, but there's still a couple supplements to that. And that's,
Yeah.
SB 553 the ANSI standard doesn't include all of that. At this point, I know that they are redoing it, and hopefully that will come and we'll have one standard again. But yeah, it does feel a little cumbersome though. And I can see how it's overwhelming for your everyday security representative, HR representative, legal team to kind of put this together.
Not only that too, but all the people you just mentioned too, like this is just one small aspect. I say small, this is just one aspect of their job. Workplace violence prevention is one aspect. HR has a whole nother many functions that they have to serve. So being able to stay up to date on all the laws, I'm sure can be an extremely overwhelming task for them to do. There's definitely ways to do it. Obviously, the ANSI standard is going to get that good foundation, but making sure that we're adapting our policy specific is so important. Obviously, we recommend hiring somebody from the outside that's their job, is to stay up to date on that stuff and making sure it's incorporated into your policy. And being involved in that community that's going to be being involved in the ASIS community is going to help keep you up to date on a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah. Here's a perfect example of how all of this works together. Idaho, a couple of years ago, had a mass shooting at the mall down in Boise. That went to trial. At the federal level, you have the general duty clause, right? So the general duty clause, you got to maintain a workplace free from recognized hazards. Okay, cool. Well, that recognizes workplace violence. How did the Secretary of who was the secretary? Anyway, how did OSHA basically say that the organization complied with the general duty clause? They took the ANSI standard and basically used that as the measure for whether they comply to the general duty clause. So does it cover every single nook and cranny of the legislation? No, it doesn't. There's still going to be some things that you have to apply. But it's interesting in that with that particular case, that was the first time that the ANSI standard was used to benchmark compliance against federal legislation for a mass shooting. We've seen it time and time again using that document plus other OSHA documentation, absent legislation, for civil litigation, all the things. But when we have these different state laws coming out, if you take that law and you superimpose that ANSI standard right over the top of it, that's going to give you like the 90 percentile. And then, okay, now you work it in from there. Maybe you have to cross-pollinate some language, hazard, risk. Hazard is a safety term, risk, that's what we use in the security space. But taking those things and overlapping them is going to get you a long way. But any final comments or tips for folks out there before we wrap this one up?
I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
Right on. So if you're addressing laws, if you have state laws, even federal laws that are applying to you, maybe your healthcare industry, general industry, we are in a regulatory environment. It's nothing to be concerned by. Take a look at the vernacular, definitely check out that standard, but ultimately look at the ways the different resources are just out there and available. There's a lot of resources. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're a partner for you in this space. We want to help you make sure you're not only complying, but making an effective violence prevention program. That's what this is all about. So if you have any questions, reach out to us, cpps.com. Sign up for the newsletter. The centerfold will get you all the information you need at any given time. But we're here for you. Take care until the next video. Thanks a lot.